Stop right now if you are not ready to see Hollywood's golden dust turn into caked blood and prison grime. You thought the classic stars were angels with flawless manners? Today, I am going to shatter that myth and show you the true faces of those you worshipped. Behind the curtains of great films lurked monsters whose hands were soaked in blood, drugs, and perversion. We will peer into police reports that studios kept hidden in secret archives for decades. 10 unbelievable crimes that will make your hair stand on end. And the final story is a waking nightmare. The most beautiful actress of the era, the muse of millions, was implicated in a brutal murder the police could not solve for years, until the truth surfaced from beneath the floor of her luxurious mansion. Watch until the end to learn which of these so-called gods was a true serial monster. But before we begin with the first star, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a comment. Enjoy the show. Lana Turner was an icon. They called her the girl in the sweater, the embodiment of the American dream, whose posters hung in every barracks. She was MGM's greatest cash cow, a goddess whose image was never meant to be stained by a single shadow. But on April 4th, 1958, the fairy tale turned into a bloody thriller that forever changed Hollywood history. That fatal night, the body of Johnny Stompanato, a notorious gangster and mob bodyguard, was found in her Beverly Hills mansion. He lay on the carpet in the actress's bedroom, a kitchen carving knife protruding from his abdomen. A vast pool of blood spread around him, reflecting the full horror of what had truly happened behind closed doors. The official version, leaked to the newspapers within an hour, was flawless. Cheryl Crane, Lana Turner's 14-year-old daughter, had supposedly run in to the sound of her mother's screams as she was being brutally beaten by her enraged mobster lover. Defending the person closest to her, the girl allegedly grabbed a knife and stabbed Johnny. Self-defense, a child's tragedy. The whole world wept with Lana as she testified in court. It was the greatest performance of her career. She wrung her hands, her voice trembled, and tears fell onto her black veil. The jury was spellbound. Cheryl was acquitted and placed in her grandmother's custody. Case closed? Not even close. Behind the scenes of this carefully staged spectacle stood the full force of studio public relations and mob connections. All of Hollywood knew the truth. Lana Turner had a ferocious, uncontrollable temper. Her relationship with Stompanato was a cycle of wild orgies, drunken brawls, and mutual threats. That night, neighbors did not hear cries for help. They heard Lana herself, shrieking with blind jealousy and rage. There is a version of events, backed by insiders and forensic experts of the time, that leaves little room for doubt. The knife was wielded by Lana herself. She killed her lover in a fit of unhinged fury. But for MGM, an actress-murderer meant the collapse of an empire worth hundreds of millions. If Lana went to prison, the studio would go under. The decision was made instantly. Studio lawyers and private detectives arrived at the house before the police. They adjusted the crime scene, wiped away inconvenient fingerprints, and persuaded 14-year-old Cheryl to take the blame. The child was promised that because of her age, nothing would happen to her, and her mother would remain free. It was one of the most cynical betrayals imaginable. A mother forced her own daughter to carry the burden of murder for the rest of her life. Cheryl Crane was forever trapped in the shadow of that crime, later attempting suicide and spending years under psychiatric care. She became a living shield for her monstrous mother. Lana Turner, cleansed by the court, made a triumphant return to the screen in Imitation of Life, which became a box-office hit fueled by the scandal itself. She monetized her lover's blood and her daughter's shattered fate. But this was only the tip of the iceberg.
While Lana played the role of the grieving mother, on the other side of Los Angeles, another man was carrying out his dark deeds. His name became synonymous with laughter, yet his real life was steeped in lust for those who had not yet grown up.
For generations of viewers, Charlie Chaplin was more than an actor. He was the conscience of an era. His little tramp became a symbol of human dignity, compassion for the weak, and quiet defiance against a cruel world. At a time when Hollywood was still building its own mythology, Chaplin stood at the pinnacle, a genius, a billionaire, a beloved idol, a man to whom anything seemed forgiven. Yet behind this almost saintly facade lay a personal life increasingly at odds with public morality. The first serious cracks appeared in the late 19-teens. Chaplin's marriage to Mildred Harris shocked the public. Their relationship began when she was very young, and much of the union was forced. Their life together quickly descended into a series of scandals, mutual accusations, and court battles. Newspapers eagerly dissected every detail, gradually eroding the carefully constructed studio image of the ideal humanist. But this episode was only a prologue. Far greater public attention came with his second marriage to Lita Grey. Chaplin met her while working on The Gold Rush, and their relationship immediately became fodder for gossip. When the divorce came, court documents exploded into a scandal. Testimonies, lawyer statements, and trial records painted a picture of an extremely tense and unequal union, where the power and influence of one man dictated everything. The case became one of the most talked-about trials in 1920s Hollywood. For the first time, the public saw Chaplin not as a philosophical screen hero, but as a man with a hard character, prone to control and manipulation. For an industry accustomed to keeping such stories hidden, it was a warning. Even the greatest stars could no longer be completely shielded from public judgment. The final blow to Chaplin's reputation came in the 1940s. The case with actress Joan Barry became a national scandal. He was charged under the federal Mann Act, and the trial attracted immense media attention. In court, it wasn't just this specific case that was examined. The scrutiny extended to his entire lifestyle, his past relationships, his political leanings, and his personal conduct. Although later biological tests proved Chaplin was not Barry's child's father, public opinion had already shifted. He was no longer untouchable. For many Americans, he transformed from beloved idol to symbol of moral hypocrisy, a man whose films preached compassion while his private life raised ever-growing questions. Amid these events, intensified by the political climate of McCarthyism, Chaplin left the United States. Officially, it was in protest against the pressure and suspicion he faced. In reality, Hollywood could no longer, or would no longer, protect its former idol. He settled in Europe, where he spent the rest of his life insisting he had been a victim of unjust persecution. Charlie Chaplin's story remains one of the most controversial in the history of classic Hollywood. His contribution to cinema is undeniable, yet the gap between his screen persona and his real-life self became increasingly impossible to ignore. He was a genius who created the language of silent film, but also a man whose private life shattered the myth he had built. It is from stories like these that the dark side of the Golden Age begins, a time when behind the glittering lights lay hidden lives, scandals, and secrets that for decades were kept in silence.
Roscoe "Fatty" Arbuckle. Brace yourself, because we're about to descend to the deepest level of Hollywood's hell. In the early 1920s, Roscoe "Fatty" Arbuckle was the second biggest name in cinema after Chaplin. A good-natured giant, his infectious laugh and astonishing agility for his size brought Paramount Studios enormous profits. In 1921, he signed the first-ever million-dollar contract in film history. He was universally adored, Uncle Roscoe, until one wild night at the St. Francis Hotel stripped away the mask of the man and revealed the beast within, a creature whose appetite for violence knew no bounds. The crime that followed was so heinous it permanently reshaped film censorship, but it was far too late to save the victim. On September 5, 1921, Arbuckle decided to celebrate his success with a multi-day drunken party in San Francisco. Alcohol flowed freely despite prohibition, and hotel rooms were filled with starlets seeking fame. Among them was Virginia Rappe, a young actress hoping for the protection of the star. Witnesses recalled that a heavily intoxicated Arbuckle, weighing over 260 pounds, grabbed Virginia by the arm and, with a greasy grin, dragged her into room 1219, muttering, "I've waited too long for this." What happened behind that locked door still sends chills down the spines of forensic historians. After a short time, screams, raw and bone-chilling, echoed from the room. When the guests finally broke in, they were confronted with a horrifying scene: Virginia Rappe writhing in unbearable pain on the bed, her clothing torn, while Arbuckle stood calmly nearby, finishing a sandwich. When asked what had happened, he waved it off. She just drank too much. But the girl moaned, "He hurt me. He's killing me." 3 days later, Virginia was dead. An autopsy revealed the monstrous truth. Her bladder had been shredded and her internal organs reduced to a bloody pulp. The investigation put forth a version that shook all of America. Arbuckle, in a drug and alcohol-fueled frenzy, attacked the young woman, and his immense weight literally crushed her during the assault. But that was not all. Bambina Maud Delmont claimed that the comic, enraged by the victim's resistance, used the neck of a champagne bottle or, in some accounts, a piece of ice or broken furniture to further violate her. It was not merely rape, it was sadistic torture, reducing a young woman's body to ruins. Hollywood's machine roared into action to protect its prime asset. The studio hired top lawyers who systematically destroyed the dead girl's reputation. She was called cheap, syphilitic, and blamed for her own death with claims that her organs were too fragile. Arbuckle faced trial 3 times. Twice, the juries failed to reach a verdict. On the third, after immense pressure from the film industry, he was acquitted. But when he stepped out of the courtroom, the world already hated him. His films were burned, his name erased from credits, and audiences whistled when his face appeared on screen. Roscoe "Fatty" Arbuckle became a living corpse, a symbol of how vast sums of money can buy exoneration for even the most monstrous crimes. Yet, if Arbuckle destroyed one life in a drunken rage, the next star operated on a far larger, more calculated scale. This man was the epitome of masculinity, but in secret, he betrayed not just a woman, but all of humanity, willingly becoming an accomplice to the bloodiest ideology in history.
Errol Flynn. Errol Flynn was the gold standard of masculinity, a perfect profile, a daring mustache, and a rapier in hand. On screen, he became the symbol of adventure, justice, and courage, transforming into the legendary Robin Hood and Captain Blood. His charm captivated audiences, and his energy and charisma made him a favorite on both sides of the Atlantic. Every film was a celebration for fans, and Flynn himself embodied the dream of a heroic world where good triumphs over evil. But behind this shining mask of a hero lay a complex and contradictory personality. Flynn was known for his adventurous travels, connections in various circles, and an unusual lifestyle that sometimes shocked the public. He loved risk, quickly made friends and allies, knew how to negotiate, and won people's hearts with his charm.
These qualities made him both a public favorite and a figure of debate among journalists and historians. In 1980, historians studying the archives of the time revealed new facts about Flynn's life. They showed that his activities and interests went far beyond cinema. Flynn often found himself in complicated and questionable situations that put his reputation at risk. The public and press actively discussed these revelations, creating an atmosphere of mystery and intrigue around him. Flynn also faced legal disputes and scandals that tested his character and reputation. Despite this, his charisma and popularity helped him navigate challenges and remain at the height of fame. It was during this period that the famous expression, "in like Flynn," emerged, becoming a symbol of easy success, luck, and charm that could open any door. Flynn's personal life was also full of complexity and adventure. He loved travel, sports, and sea expeditions, and his energy and curiosity made him someone who was always at the center of events. Even off-screen, he attracted people to him, found himself in fascinating situations, and created an aura of mystery and adventure around himself. Errol Flynn died at the age of 50, leaving behind a legacy full of legends, questions, and memories of Hollywood's golden era. He was both a screen hero and a complex, multifaceted individual, reminding us that appearance, charm, and fame rarely tell the whole truth about a person. His life is a story of talent, adventure, and mysteries that continue to intrigue historians, biographers, and fans. Flynn became a symbol of an era when Hollywood created idols and legends, while showing that behind the magic on screen lies a far more complex reality. His name remains in the audience's memory as the embodiment of courage, audacity, and charm, and his life serves as a reminder that legends are always layered and contradictory.
Robert Mitchum was the king of film noir. His signature sleepy gaze, heavy jawline, and aura of absolute disregard for rules made him an icon for every bad boy in America. He was hailed as the most masculine actor of his generation, but it was the masculinity of a predator, a man who was comfortable walking along the edge of the abyss. In 1948, Hollywood was rocked by a scandal. The studio's top star was arrested during a massive raid on one of Los Angeles's dirtiest drug dens. This wasn't a casual bust for a marijuana joint. It was the exposure of a man at the center of the shadowy world, supplying prohibited substances to Beverly Hills elite. That night, narcotics agents stormed a small house in Laurel Canyon. What they found resembled a scene from a crime documentary more than the life of a movie star. Mitchum was in the company of known drug dealers and dubious starlets, surrounded by clouds of marijuana smoke and cocaine powder. Investigators quickly established that the actor was not just visiting, he was a regular client, and, according to some reports, a middleman between mafia networks supplying drugs and Hollywood's high society. His financials were convoluted, and his contacts led to the darkest corners of Los Angeles's underground. While studio executives tore their hair out trying to salvage the reputation of Mitchum's just-released film, Rachel and the Stranger, he acted behind bars as if he were still on a movie set. He posed for photographers in his prison garb, wearing a smug grin, telling reporters, "It's like Hollywood, only the makeup artists here are worse." But beneath the bravado lay a fear of real consequences. Mitchum was sentenced to 60 days of work release and jail time. He became the first top-tier star officially labeled a criminal due to drug involvement. At that time, marijuana was considered killer weed in America, associated with total moral decay. Mitchum should have been ostracized, yet something extraordinary happened. His cynical attitude toward the law and refusal to show remorse only amplified his popularity. He turned his crime into part of his bad boy brand. Yet in secret FBI reports of the era, he was listed as a dangerous element with extensive connections in the criminal underworld. Mitchum continued using drugs for the rest of his life, skillfully masking his addiction behind the image of an eternally sleep-deprived macho man. But if Mitchum merely trafficked in poisons for the soul, the next story tells of a crime that engulfed an entire city. A director who knew too much was found with a bullet in his heart, and his killer was never caught because everyone was implicated, from the brightest screen stars to the heads of the largest studios.
William Desmond Taylor. William Desmond Taylor was one of the most influential and respected directors of the silent film era, a man who held the fates of hundreds of actors in his hands. He embodied British aristocracy in the wild heart of Los Angeles, but on the morning of February 2nd, 1922, that impeccable facade collapsed, exposing the fetid pit in which Hollywood's elite wallowed. Taylor was found dead in his office, lying on his back, a .38 caliber bullet hole in his chest. His murder became a point of no return, revealing a network of drug trafficking, sexual exploitation, and blackmail that ensnared the industry's top figures. What happened in Taylor's home before the police arrived can only be called the greatest crime scene cleanup in forensic history. Paramount Studios representatives reached the scene before the detectives. While the director's body was still warm, they feverishly burned incriminating letters, destroyed lists of dealers, and hid mountains of women's lingerie found in his bedroom. Taylor didn't just make films, he was the Grey Cardinal of vice. Letters from young starlets coerced into cohabiting in exchange for roles were discovered along with caches of cocaine he supplied to his muses. The prime suspects quickly became two superstars, Mabel Normand and Mary Miles Minter. Mabel had been the last person to see him alive. She had come by for a dose of drugs. Mary, just 19, was a nymphette whose mother, Charlotte Shelby, would do anything to hide her daughter's illicit relationship with the aging director. When police finally began their search, they found Mary's nightgown embroidered with her initials and a bullet of the same caliber that killed Taylor, hidden in her mother's purse. But Hollywood could not allow justice to prevail. Revealing the truth would have ended the careers of dozens of stars and shattered a multi-million-dollar business. Witnesses were intimidated, evidence disappeared from police files, and the investigation was deliberately misled. Taylor's murder remained unsolved, not because the killer was clever, but because the killer was Hollywood itself. The entire city made a pact of silence to protect its filthy secrets. Yet, if Taylor's death was the result of conspiracy, the next tragedy was an act of pure, unrestrained violence. A man considered the very model of nobility turned his wedding night into a bloodbath, proving that an Oscar could be earned even for a role you play in front of your own victim.
Gig Young. Gig Young was the epitome of the Hollywood gentleman, charming, witty, always sporting a flawless smile and a martini in hand. In 1969, he earned a well-deserved Oscar for his role in They Shoot Horses, Don't They?, playing a cynical coordinator of a marathon dance. No one could have guessed that the title of that film would turn out to be eerily prophetic for the actor himself. Beneath the mask of the suave socialite lurked a degenerating alcoholic with sadistic tendencies and a chilling obsession with firearms. His life was a long performance, the final act drenched in real, not cinematic blood. The tragedy that shook America unfolded in October 1978. Young had just married for the 5th time, this time to a young and beautiful German woman, Kim Schmidt, 30 years his junior. It seemed like the start of a new chapter, but for Kim, it became a death sentence. Just 3 weeks after the wedding, police stormed their upscale Manhattan apartment. What they found defied comprehension. Kim lay on the bed, shot at point-blank range. Gig Young lay beside her, clutching the same revolver he had used first to coldly execute his wife and then to turn the gun on himself. The investigation revealed monstrous details. Young had terrorized his previous wives for years. His third wife, actress Elizabeth Montgomery, had fled him, unable to endure the constant beatings and death threats.
Young suffered from paranoia and delusions of persecution, which he drowned in liters of whiskey. The studios knew about his violent outbursts, about him showing up on set with a gun and aiming at the makeup artists, but all of it was carefully concealed. Young was one of their own, untouchable by the law. On the day of the murder, Kim had tried to pack her things and leave, but Young decided that if she didn't belong to him, she would belong to no one. He turned their bedroom into a shooting range, performing his most terrifying role. The cruelest detail? His cherished Oscar statuette was found in the same room, silently watching its owner transform into a butcher. Gig Young proved that in Hollywood, one could be adored by millions while harboring the soul of a serial killer. Yet if Young acted in a fit of madness, the next star was a calculating predator. She didn't just kill, she turned the deaths of her loved ones into profit, becoming the richest and most dangerous widow in screen history.
Libby Holman. Libby Holman was more than an actress and singer. She was the embodiment of dangerous eroticism and fatal passion. With her low, velvety voice and cascade of dark hair, she became the first queen of torch songs, singing of unrequited love. But in reality, Libby didn't suffer from love, she devoured it, consuming the hearts and bank accounts of America's wealthiest men. Her story is a cynical thriller about how one woman outwitted the law, the press, and even one of the country's most powerful families, leaving behind a trail of corpses and mountains of blood-stained money. In 1931, Libby made her most audacious deal by marrying Zachary Smith Reynolds, the 20-year-old heir to the Reynolds tobacco empire. He was fabulously wealthy, young, and mentally unstable, the perfect target for Holman, who was 7 years his senior and had the grip of a bulldog. Just 6 months into the marriage, during a raucous party at their estate, a gunshot rang out. Zachary was found on the balcony, a .32 caliber bullet in his head. Libby, standing nearby, was drenched in her husband's blood. She and her alleged lover, the murdered man's best friend, were charged with first-degree murder. Prosecutors were certain Libby had shot her husband in a fit of rage when he threatened to cut her out of his inheritance. The entire world watched the trial. On the defendant's bench sat a black widow, calmly taking the life of a young man for his $20 million fortune. But Libby Holman was a brilliant actress off stage as well. She turned every hearing into a morbid performance, alternately swooning in theatrical unconsciousness or claiming her husband had committed a mysterious suicide. What happened next was a slap in the face of justice. The Reynolds family, wielding immense influence, suddenly demanded the case be dropped. Why? It turned out that Libby had threatened to reveal sordid details of their son's sexual deviance and drug use to the press, details that would have destroyed the tobacco empire's reputation in a single day. The Reynolds effectively bought her freedom, paying for her silence. Libby Holman left the courtroom not just free, but a multi-millionaire, taking the lion's share of her husband's inheritance. Her life afterwards was a series of tragedies. Her only son died under mysterious circumstances in the mountains, and her lovers ended their lives one by one in suicide, curse, or inevitability. Libby's story ended in 1971, when she died from carbon monoxide poisoning in her Rolls-Royce. She took the truth of that balcony night to the grave, proving that in Hollywood, blood on your hands can easily be washed away with a shower of gold. But if Libby killed for money, the next woman on our list was labeled a criminal simply for daring to speak openly about sex. She went to prison with her head held high, turning her arrest into the most profitable publicity stunt in show business history.
Mae West. If the previous figures on our list hid their sins in the shadows, Mae West put hers on full display, turning lust into a profitable brand. In the 1920s, when America still shuddered at even the mention of female sexuality, Mae West burst onto the stage as a living manifesto of sin. She didn't kill or rob, but her crimes against public morality were considered almost more dangerous than political conspiracies. In 1927, Hollywood and Broadway froze. The nation's most scandalous blonde was arrested in the middle of a performance and sentenced to jail. Mae's crime was that she had written and staged a play provocatively titled Sex. New York authorities, egged on by religious zealots, accused her of corrupting the youth and public indecency. Conservative society demanded blood. They wanted to see Mae West humiliated, stripped down, and repentant for her sharp wit and voluptuous curves. But they had underestimated her. West was not just an actress, she was a brilliant strategist who understood that in show business there is no such thing as bad publicity. The court sentenced her to 10 days on Welfare Island, and here the real farce began, one that would go down in history. Mae West arrived at the prison gates in a luxurious limousine, draped in sable furs and diamonds worth a small city's budget. As throngs of fans roared in delight, she languidly told reporters she planned to wear only silk underwear beneath her prison garb because rough fabrics harm her delicate skin. She wasn't going to jail, she was going on tour. Behind bars, Mae created a royal life for herself. She dined with the warden, who was enchanted by her presence, and spent her time writing new scripts. When she was released after 8 days for exemplary behavior, her popularity soared to unprecedented heights. Her jail sentence turned her into an icon of free speech and the most desirable woman in America. She proved that you could break the law, be labeled a criminal, and still make the whole country play by your rules. Mae West turned her fall into millions. But the next story on our list has nothing to do with triumph. The final chapter tells of a woman whose beauty was merely a cover for connections with some of Latin America's bloodiest dictators and drug cartels. She lived in luxury, built on cocaine and political assassinations.
Paulette Goddard. Paulette Goddard was the embodiment of joie de vivre and femininity. She was the kind of sunshine actress who captivated geniuses: Charlie Chaplin, Eric Maria Remarque, Diego Rivera. Her laughter seemed genuine, her career in Modern Times and The Great Dictator flawless. But while Hollywood saw her as a muse, U.S. and Mexican intelligence agencies recognized her as one of the most dangerous and calculating women of the era. Paulette was not merely an actress, she was a golden bridge between Hollywood and the bloodiest power networks in Latin America. She was accused of everything from gold smuggling to laundering money from Mexican drug lords and assisting in the elimination of political rivals. Paulette's secret life came to light during her prolonged trips to Mexico in the 1940s. Officially, she posed for the great artist Diego Rivera, but unofficially, she became the favorite and financial confidant of some of the most corrupt and high-ranking officials in the Mexican government. In 1940, her name surfaced in a case involving the disappearance of an opposition leader who threatened to expose opium supply chains to the United States. Witnesses claimed Paulette leveraged her connections and the diplomatic immunity granted by infatuated ministers to transport cash and jewels across the border, wealth extracted at the expense of Mexican peasants. The FBI monitored her every move for years. In Edgar Hoover's secret files, Paulette was listed as a high-risk asset. It was said that her lavish jewelry collection, the most expensive in the world, was not gifts from husbands, but payments for her delicate services. Most of her diamonds were listed by Interpol as stolen during bloody coups. Paulette had a singular talent. She could charm investigators as effortlessly as she charmed audiences. When a scandal erupted in Mexico over the murder of a high-ranking official in his own home, Paulette coincidentally arrived first at the scene. But rather than summon the police, she reportedly cleaned out the victim's safe of compromising documents and gold bars.
She was a true Hollywood Mata Hari, turning her life into an endless operation of profit built on others' deaths. Paulette Goddard lived to 80 in Switzerland, enveloped in wealth and tranquility. She never gave interviews about her life in Mexico, only smiling enigmatically while adjusting necklaces that had cost hundreds of lives. She departed undefeated, leaving behind nothing but a legend of beauty and the emptiness of police archives meticulously scrubbed by her powerful friends.
These 10 stories aren't just dry facts from police reports or yellowed newspaper clippings. They are a verdict on an entire industry that spent decades selling us false ideals while real blood flowed behind the scenes. We've seen that those the world worshipped as gods were in fact slaves to their own vices, ambitions, and greed. Hollywood is not a city of dreams. It's a massive, soulless machine that processes human lives, where talent grants the right to crime and vast wealth buys amnesia for justice. Look at the terrible price these people and those around them paid. We've seen mothers betray their children for freedom, comedians whose jokes ended in the dying gasps of their victims, and national heroes secretly shaking hands with humanity's executioners. This is the true face of the Golden Age, an era when the glow of the spotlights existed only to blind us and conceal the filth, debauchery, and corpses tucked away in the closets of Beverly Hills mansions. The Dream Factory fed us fairy tales, while its leading players wrote their own histories in the blood of the innocent. The tragedy is that many of these crimes were never properly punished. Murderers died in silk, rapists rested on laurels. Those who sold their country basked in applause until the end of their days. The system protected its monsters because they were profitable. And today, watching classic masterpieces, we can never look these actors in the eye the same way again. We now know that behind the camera, someone always held a knife, a bribe, or a vial of poison. The golden dust has fallen away, revealing the rusted skeleton of an industry without mercy. Which story chilled you the most? Who on this list was a victim of the system, and who was an outright monster unfit for cinematic history? Share your thoughts in the comments. Let's hold a true court of history right here. Don't forget to like this honest and dangerous investigation. Your support helps us bring to light truths that were lacquered over for decades. Subscribe so you won't miss the next installments. Hollywood's archives still hide plenty of skeletons.